So, hi everyone, I'm Alex Mahon, Head of Analytics at UK Power Networks. So I'm going to be covering today how to gain stakeholder buy-in for analytics. And it's interesting actually because ROI is obviously a big part of that. Everyone sees it in the news and everyone gets very excited about these £1 million AIs that are saving everyone loads of money, or automating processes so they can make all their efficiencies and all the rest of it. But I guess one of the key things I want to talk about is some of my experiences before this role when I was in the consulting space, and then my experiences to date and what seems to be working for me at the moment. Before we get started though, I'm going to ask each of you to grab your phone. So if you can take just a couple of seconds now and just grab your phone, it will work on anything, or if you're at a laptop, you can just open an extra browser and go onto that. And I want you to go to a website called menti.com. And we're going to try and answer this next question and have a bit of a talk through it. So, is that going to, there we go. So if you go to menti.com at the bottom here, so menti.com, and all I want you to do is input the code that's at the bottom of the screen there. So 7028189. So hopefully when you enter that code, what you should find is that you get taken through to a beautiful web page that looks something like that. And you should be able to answer this question or have a go at it anyway. So my background is I used to be a management consultant. So I worked with a multitude of clients internationally on a range of different data science style projects. So my track record was that I worked with, over a 4-year period, 9 different clients. For those 9 clients, I delivered 14 different projects. And for those 14 projects, over 60 what I would class as level 5 insights. So a level 5 insight is something that I would say is so statistically robust that you could hand it into a regulatory body and hand a multi-million-pound business case on it. For those 60 plus insights, I then recommended over 400 actions. And for those 400 actions, what we were trying to get the business to do was to change. And actually, when it actually came down to it, my track record wasn't quite as good as I was hoping. But what I want to do now is, let's see, how do we do this on Zoom? We're a Teams house. This is probably not going to be as slick as I was hoping. I actually can't bring that up. Okay, basically, and I apologize because you're not going to be able to see this, but 5 of you have said 0 to 5%, 3 of you have said 6 to 20%, 3 of you have said 21 to 50%, 4 of you have now said 20. Oh, there's still people inputting data here. I've somehow shrunk the Zoom bar to the side, so I can only put, there it is. Wicked. So what you should be able to see there, hopefully, is the Menti screen. Joe, can you see that?
Yes, mate. Yep.
Perfect. So as you can see, most of you are saying around 0 to 5%, with then nobody seems to think that more than 50% of analytically derived insights have any action associated with them. And I think for me, based on my experience, I'd agree with that. So 9 clients, 14 assignments, over 60 level 5 insights, and then over 400 associated recommendations. I only know, talking to clients afterwards, of 11 of those recommendations that was taken up, which gives me a magical number of 3%. And I found myself at the end of that asking the question of, after 4 years of work, so bear in mind we all work for what, like 40 years, so I spent 10% of my life achieving a figure of 3%. And I guess for me, I wanted to understand, why is this so low? Why were stakeholders not buying in to the analytics? I was working with people who were former space agency rocket scientists, people from F1, people who design cutting edge drugs for pharmaceutical companies. This stuff wasn't crap, and I could absolutely robustly defend it. So why weren't people buying into it? And as I was researching, I came across three things, and it reminded me actually why people probably weren't into this stuff. And it's because analytics isn't about numbers. It's not about spreadsheets. It's not about how beautifully presented you can make things. All of those things are really important, but actually analytics is about change. Analytics is definitely about change, because actually, why are we investing all of this money? Why are we building teams? Why are we spending all of this effort if it's not about changing from the status quo? It's either to try and get a competitive advantage, or it's to design a new product, or sell more of something, make more of something. But analytics is about change, and change is about people. Change is not about a new slight improvement on a system or anything else. Change is about how people are engaged with and how they feel about something. If you're changing a service, if you're developing a new product, it's because you're changing the way that people are engaging with you. So your end customers are experiencing a change in the service you're giving. By the same token, if it's an internal thing, it's still about change, because you're trying to change the way people work. And so it's really important that when you're thinking about analytics and when you're trying to get stakeholder buy-in to stuff, you're not thinking about analytics, you're thinking about change. And to make sure that change lands, you've got to co-create it. Because if you try and do an assignment and walk away afterwards, it's not going to work, and you'll end up with a figure of 3%. So I guess for me, if I look at it, I think of a piece of analytics as being a 5-step process, nice and simple, where you basically start from the problem is identified by the business or by the customers. That problem gets handed to you. You then do some analysis, you get some insight, and you recommend an action. The business takes the action and change happens. But the reality is that there is a point after the insight and the recommendation of the action where for some reason you just end up with this. Because all the excitement, all the energy that's been built around the analytics that's been done, and all the fantastic graphs and playbacks you've given to people, suddenly they've actually got to do something with it, and they freeze. And in healthcare, this is described as the second translational gap. So this particular model actually came from the NHS, who I've never historically have thought of as being a data leader, but what they did is really simple. So they identified a problem. You'll all remember the SARS outbreak sort of 10, 15 years ago. Not SARS, sorry, the bug, the super bug in the hospitals that nothing could kill. What they did is they were trying to identify what's causing this increase in patient infections. So they undertook some analysis, and what they realized, the insight that they generated, was that doctors and nurses weren't washing their hands in between seeing patients. So 20 years ago, if you went in a hospital, they'd just go from bed to bed. The action that they recommended was get healthcare professionals and visitors to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer before they move on into different bits of the ward or before they see someone else. Getting doctors and other people to do that took 4 years. A really simple thing, wash your hands, took 4 years, and probably exacerbated the condition and also probably sped up the deaths of some of those people in hospitals. That's how serious this problem was. But even then, it took 4 years to get everyone to a standard where actually they were regularly doing that just as a status quo. So getting to that change, that affected change as a result of the action, took some real effort. And whenever I think of the effort involved in that, it makes me think of Cars. So I don't know if any of you have got kids, but Disney Cars 2, you've got Lightning McQueen, who is the hotshot roadster on the red here. And he's in the previous films, he's winning all the time because he's worked really hard and he continues to work hard. And in each of the films, he works a little bit harder and he just wins. And it's amazing. Hard work pays off and he gets where he needs to be. But in Cars 3, you see this guy on the left-hand side in the black coming out. And what's really interesting is that his team are backed with data and insight and analytics. And basically, he knows exactly when he needs to overtake people. He knows exactly what line on the track he needs to take. And he does it. Whereas Lightning McQueen, even when people are telling him he should be doing it, sticks with his old regime of trying to work harder and harder and trying to go faster and faster. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work because he just can't compete. by the end of the film, he actually starts listening to the data and the insight, and he actually starts winning again. And for me, this is a fantastic example of how Walt Disney is actually filled with data scientists, because it's something I wasn't aware of, but I don't think it is. But for me, it's a really good example of how even in children's narratives, we're now getting to a point where we're telling kids that just working hard isn't enough. Sometimes you've actually got to work smart. So everything else that we'll cover over the next couple of slides is really interesting, and I'm going to talk through some frameworks for how you can get the stakeholder buy-in, or at least the one that's working for us at the moment. But this, to me, is the key slide. If you take nothing else away from this presentation, then please remember this, that the business of analytics, the way that you gain stakeholder buy-in, is not analytics. It's about change. It's remembering that the only reason you're doing what you're doing, the only reason they're paying you, the only reason they're getting you in, or that you're already there, the only reason you're there is about change. Nobody does analytics to maintain the status quo. And change is not about spreadsheets, it's about people. So let's go back to the Menti for a second. What I'd like to do now is we're going to do a bit of a word cloud. So for me, what I want to try and get a feel for from you guys is, why are people so resistant to change? And bear with me a second. So if you go back to your Menti, you should, in a second, through the wonders of the internet maybe, be able to see the next slide, or not. This is a classic example of having not done this online on Zoom. I'll tell you what, let's go a bit differently. Rather than using some shiny technology, let's just spend 10 seconds. And what I'd like you to do is to put into the chat. So if you can put them into the chat on the Zoom call, why you think people are so resistant to change. So we'll give it a couple of seconds and we'll come to some of those. I bet none of you anticipated that you'd actually have to do any of this, did you? It's always nice to put people on the spot. Good one. So David, perceived workload, headspace, content and the status quo, unsafe, requires effort, don't understand the benefits, fear of failure, the unknown, fear. Yeah, there's some great ones here. Fear seems to be a big one. Yeah, people are afraid. So I think all of those are really true. So for me, when I think about change, I think of three things. And I think between all of you on there, you've probably picked up on most of them. It's about the lack, or the perceived lack of reward for people for the amount of effort that is required. I think there's a thing around the fear of the unknown. So exactly as many of you picked up on there. And I also think one of the ones that I come across time and time again, but I work in ex-public sector utilities. So, you know, they're commercial organizations, but not really. They've still got a culture of, 2000. The loss of status or visibility in the organization, that is a huge, huge driver of behaviors. And I think if you're trying to get stakeholder buy-in to act on the analytics, or to, embed a new tool, or to work in a different way, or to adopt a new process, you've got to start by understanding which of these three things are those stakeholders experiencing. Because if you don't understand those, then you're not going to be able to communicate and engage with them in a way that takes it through. So what I'm going to touch on now is a way that we're working at UK Power Networks with our internal teams. So it's something that you could take elsewhere. It's something you could put into your ways of working with other organizations. But what we'll do is I'll start with how do you get the buy-in at the start? I think, was it Wayne asked the question around this? So for us, we start with the corporate strategy. So we look at what are the KPIs in the corporate strategy, and we have discussions with our senior leaders, so with our executive team, and we say, okay, where are your pain points? Where are your biggest areas of challenge? Which of our KPIs are we not delivering against, or which ones do we want to smash? And we start with the outcome. What that means is that we can always pretty much put a pound value against it. And then we work down what we call here the value pyramid. So we start with what is the outcome that the business wants to achieve, and how does it align to the corporate strategy? We then engage with those middle managers and those frontline staff who understand the business processes, and we get a feel from them what actions they think that they could take to help improve that outcome. And then we have a series of workshops with them called hypothesis workshops, where for each of those actions, we'll say to them, okay, so what hypotheses do you think are resulting in your current performance in this area? If you think that the action that you could take is to move a depot location so you're all in the right spot for an emergency, what is your hypothesis there? Okay, well, we believe that our depots are not in the right space, or we believe that customers don't call us between 5 and 6 in the morning, or something like that. As you work down that pyramid, your conversation stops at insight, because actually there is no operational manager, there is no asset manager, there is no drug development leader or anything like that who cares what type of analytics you're doing, what tools and techniques you're going to use, and what data you're looking at. And if they want that conversation, then take it offline and have it privately with them. But the reality is, the only thing the business should be focusing on are the actions that they need to take to achieve the outcome. And that's what you need to facilitate in the upfront part. You've got to get the buy-in by making sure that they feel listened to and heard, making sure that you're addressing the actions and the pain points and the hypotheses that they really care about. And what we do then is we work in 3-week cycles. So I think somebody else mentioned about how does Agile work or not. And for us, we wouldn't try and do a major data science project like this, but for helping the business identify actions that it can take, this works incredibly well. So what we do is we work in 3-week cycles. So we'll have a 2 sprint. We call it 1 week, but the down weeks are not like, they're not idle. It just means it gives you a little bit of time to catch up on work internally, but also to close off the last sprint and start for the next one. So in the down week, we're normally doing is we're playing back to the executive from the last session. We're handing over the finished work to the business units. And most importantly, for the next sprint, we're agreeing the focused areas. So which hypotheses do you want us to test in the next sprint? Give people a view of how many we can fit in. So normally a team of 3 people can probably do anywhere between 5 and 6 hypotheses in a 2-week sprint. What we then spend the time is for whether we're doing this with the business sponsor or not, with the data and make sure we've got systems accesses. They don't want that. We then issue all the invites and do all the admin stuff around that. Again, they're not fussed with that. During sprint itself, there's then 5 really key sessions meeting where we play to the wider team in the business. And we say the wider, it's not the wider analytics team, the wider business team who's going to be the kind of the key stakeholders for the actions that come out of this. We have the kickoff meeting and explain which hypotheses we're doing and the approach. We have daily stand-ups, so a 15-minute daily stand-up with representatives from the business. So on that call, it is literally to do, in progress, and done. We then, in week 1 on the Friday, so 5 days in, we have a steering session. Because we've done all of that upfront prep and we know we've got the data and we've got the system access, on that Friday, we can have a really sensible meeting with people where we say, okay, this is the initial view that we've got for these 5 or 6 hypotheses. Where do you want us to go with this? Does this give you enough information to take an action on, yes or no? If no, do you want us to go deeper or do you want us to stop? And that way, what we can do is we can either add in additional hypotheses if we get freed up capacity, or we'll close off bits of analysis, or we'll continue going deeper until we give them the information that gives them the confidence to take an action. In week 2, on the Wednesday normally, we'll have an insight to action workshop where, based on the steers that we've had the previous week, we will then have worked a little bit more on them, put a bit more flesh and meat on the bones, and we'll say to them, okay, we've given you the insight, you told us this was the action you can take, can you do this action or not, based on what you've seen here, and if not, why not? At the end of the 2nd week, the agreed actions and the associated owners are all put together in a room, and we make everyone sign a piece of paper saying that they're going to deliver those things. And then we're down into the down week, where we play back to the exec owner everything that everyone signed up to and discuss with them what happens next. So in that way, what that means is we have a really tight cycle of activity. It's not a simple thing, and it's really structured because it has to be. because we can't just let people go off and work on things that they think are interesting or work in a random fashion. It's hypothesis led, it's outcome focused, and it is all co-created with the business with the exclusive aim of trying to drive change. So in terms of playing stuff back, we also try and make it really simple, because I mean, as Mark said, and he's spot on, the more complicated you make things, the less likely it is people are going to adopt them. So all of the actions that we give to the business are either stop, start, or continue. So stop doing this, start doing something, or continue doing what you're doing because it's really valuable. I'll put an example in as well for what we, Kanban style board. So the insight goes on the left. On hold is something where the business is still storing it for later. In progress is something they're working on. Implemented means they've already done it and have seen the benefit for it. So again, we try and make it as simple as possible. We don't just hand them a load of really complex spreadsheets or anything, because no one's going to read it. What we do is we put all of the insights onto this board and we let them, from a stop, start, or continue kind of focus, have a go at trying to address these themselves. And then I suppose the key thing is, does this approach work? So at the start, we said, okay, so what is our kind of percentage of success? And it was 3%. And on the Menti, pretty much 90% of you are all saying less than 50%. What we're talking about now is closer to 52%. So for every piece of work we're doing, over half of it is now being adopted by the business. And what that means in real terms, in terms of actual cash and value for the business, is that for every pound we're spending on analytics and the analytics team, we're getting £34 back in approved business value, because the business is saying, yes, this is real. Yes, I can go and do this. And it's already delivering. So for us, this is a really successful way of working. Based on all of that, and like we've said throughout this, I would ask you to take away one thing out of everything. Analytics is about change, and change is about people, and you've got to co-create change. So I guess at that point, I'll stop talking and ask anyone if they've got any questions.
Thank you, Alex. That was really, really great. Like Mark's, I hope there's a lot in there that people can take away. I found it really interesting for sure. So yeah, I mean, anyone with any questions, please put them in the chat. I think I'll kick off with one. I was just wondering, with that kind of stop, start, continue approach, how do you overcome the challenge that's presumably inevitable, that that there will be a lot of people within the business that are affected if some of those actions are to stop, and the opposition that those people would possibly give the analytics team and whoever's making those recommendations?
I think it goes down to that the top-down approach and the co-creation. Because you've started with the executive team, most organizations, you don't move on a groundswell. It's not like you go around 10,000 employees on the front line and say, okay guys, are we all in this? And then try and convince the people at the top. If you really want to get something done, you start at the top and work down. And actually, by starting with the outcome, it makes it crystal clear to people why you're taking that action. And because it's those middle managers that have signed off on delivering those actions, it then becomes less complex for them to be convincing their team, because they've been on that process and that journey with you over those weeks. They understand how you got to that answer, and 9 times out of 10 they've already given you the hypotheses up front, so actually you're normally helping them. Most people, the majority of people, don't want to maintain the status quo. Most people actually want things to be better.
Yeah. And any questions from anyone else?
Always worrying when there isn't. And generally suggest I've either foxed everyone or there's a more interesting chat on something else.
Well, I've got a second one, and I think it was more about sort of the wider tech industry and its approach to analytics. I was just wondering, from your perspective, because that first stat really shocked me when I saw your presentation. I shouldn't have really answered the first question as well, because I'd already seen it. But I was just wondering, what do you think needs to happen in the wider tech industry to increase that 3%?
I think we do not, as an industry, full stop, spend anywhere near enough time focusing on people. I think whether that be, we talk about, you see job specs all the time and it's like, oh, you know, can you code in 50 different languages? And can you do this? And have you got experience of doing Y and Z? And you just think, you look at those things and you're like, if anyone can do all of them, you don't even want to talk to them. Jesus, you probably couldn't talk to them. And actually, we forget a lot of the time that, you know, 90% of this stuff is about change. And actually, you change by communicating with people. So you definitely need to be focusing on those softer skills. So you should be hiring people who've got that blend, and they're not tech unicorns. Like, you can find these people. You just need to make sure that you open yourself up a little bit to not needing someone with a PhD from Oxford in computer science. Like, go for someone who can talk to someone, because they'll be able to source the hypotheses, work with people on the action, and get what you need. And a lot of the time, you don't need super fancy solutions. Sometimes it is literally just about automating a process, which is why I think, Mark, I really loved your slide on that, because a lot of the time for most organizations, all they need is that first step. It's that automation piece that a lot of them get the massive value from.
Yeah. No, agreed. I mean, yeah, in my job, you hate to see a job spec with every tech under the sun on it, and thinking you're never going to find someone who does that. But yeah, so we've got.
There's a nice one from Steve Patton.
Yeah, I was just about to read that one out. So yeah,
hi Steve.
Hi Steve. Executive and senior manager buy-in can be variable and often changeable. How have you managed this issue? Yeah, that's a good one.
So, as I said, we always start at the top. So we start with the exec. And what was really nice was we were able to grow through MV. So our very first assignment absolutely crushed it. And what we were able to demonstrate was over the course of 9 months, our customer services went from 3rd in the UK to 1st. So we're now the #1 DNO, district network operator, electricity company in the UK for customer services. And we were able to evidence how the analytics and the actions taken off the back of it had delivered that. And now we're probably the most in demand team in the business for exactly that reason.
I'd say from my end, you've kind of got to show them some jazzy stuff that either makes their life easier or saves them a massive amount of money. So as soon as you can prove that it has value. I mean, what companies care for, ultimately, it's about making profit and reducing costs, or making revenue and reducing costs. Having more profit would probably be the better way of saying it. So anything that you can do to show them how that would be achievable with the work that you're doing is just going to encourage them that this is a good thing.
Yeah, success breeds success. So unfortunately, like, you do need within a rapid time frame, within 6 months, to demonstrate a really strong ability to deliver. Like, if you go somewhere new and you've had 6 months and you haven't done something that's moved the dial in any way, shape or form, it's going to be a challenge.